I've done a few episodes on the Inner Wealth podcast about my love and affinity for astrology and human design and gene keys and soul contracts and the life you were born to live and the pattern app that's available like on your phone. I love all these systems, and I make no money for promoting any of them, but my goodness, do I love them. And they have changed my life. These systems, like especially because most of those are built on just pure raw natal astrology, understanding the planets, the signs, the houses. Most of those other systems are just built on astrology. And the more I learn about astrology and the more I study it, and the more we even have a soul science study in the Inner Wealth Mastermind where we dive into all these systems. But the more I study them and the more I teach them, especially, the more I understand them, appreciate them, and the more I can leverage them and utilize them in my life. And they have changed everything. They've helped me understand myself at a deeper level. They've helped me understand my talents, my purpose, the impact that I make. And I even had a call with a marketer, and I did an interview with Ashley Mae Fernandez on this podcast. And she was the only marketer, and I've worked with a lot of marketers, but she was the only marketer that ever asked me, or that didn't ask me, who my ideal client was. She told me who my ideal client was. And all the other marketers, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that I spent in marketing, the first question they asked me was, who is your ideal client? And I didn't have clarity on who my ideal client was. So I was speaking to the wrong people. And Ashley, in her infinite wisdom of astrology and all things soul sciences, she's the only one who told me and let me know who my ideal clients were. And it just happened to be that as she described these people, and as I learned the characteristics, they were the people that I've always enjoyed working with the most. So that should have been a giving tell. But I have a deep, deep love of astrology. Now, this is not going to be a purely an astrology podcast episode, but we're going to dabble in it and we're going to touch on it. Now, one thing I've never talked about on the Inner Wealth podcast is politics. And I'm not politically charged. I'm not politically motivated, but I am politically aware. And I don't have my emotions tied up in politics. And I believe in my own inner authority and inner power above and beyond an affiliation with a political organization. I watch politics. I'm fascinated by politics. But I'm equally fascinated by economics and by how it's used in the world and how it's structured in the world and the interdependencies of economics and the financial system. And I'm also equally fascinated by the religious authorities and the religious entanglement and the religious structures and the religious nature of leadership and authority and power in the world. And I'm equally fascinated by the global power structure and how the world has been kind of entangled all together. And there's seemingly a couple people at the top of the food chain calling the shots for the entire global establishment. Some people call it the deep state, but it's really a global power structure. And it has nets and entanglements everywhere. Now, my emotions aren't entangled with politics and economics and finances and religion and the global power structure. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I am a truth seeker, and I love to see how all of this fits together. There's this interesting thing that's happening right now, and we're not going to get really deep into politics, but we are going to get into this huge, monumental, revolutionary change that's happening in our world. And this revolution is moving at a very, very rapid pace. And I am fascinated by it, and I'm excited by it, and it's just so interesting for me to watch. And I would say that There's probably some people like me that are fascinated by it. And there's some people that are very, very threatened and very, very scared of it. And that's what this podcast episode is about, especially towards the end, that last piece right there. Now, let's get into a little bit of astrology and why all this is happening. On November 19th, 2024, a little planet called Pluto, planet or not, doesn't matter, this little thing called Pluto, which happens to be the planet of rebirth, the planet of transformation, the planet of tearing down the old and building the new, the planet of making the old, obsolete, expired, whatever it is, completely crumble so that something new and innovative and more aligned and more timely and more freeing and more, let's call it, more sovereign come into place to replace what's old, what's obsolete, and what's been torn down. On November 19th, 2024, this little thing Pluto moved into the sign of Aquarius, which shares all of those same characteristics. Aquarius is innovative and cutting edge and new and modern and forward looking and updated and upgraded. But it doesn't correlate and correspond to what's expired and to what has been and to what's obsolete and to what's no longer valuable, no longer useful. Aquarius looks forward, but never back. The sign of Aquarius is all about the new invention at the expense of the old, expired, obsolete structures, materials, contracts, agreements, systems, programming. Aquarius looks forward and doesn't have allegiance to anything that's already considered legacy. And on November 19th, 2024, this little planet of let me say that again. On November 19th, 2024, this little planet of revolution moved into the sign of revolution. And if you pay attention, all hell is breaking loose. Now, over the last few years, Pluto's dipped in and out of Aquarius a couple times. It's retrograded in and out of Aquarius. But on November 19th, it locks into place, and it's going to be here for about 19 years. Pluto has entered the sign of Aquarius for 19 years. And if you watch and pay attention to what's happened over the last just few months, political structures are tearing down. Social contracts are tearing down. Scientific communities are being torn apart. We've got religious affiliations that are being torn apart. We've got global power structures that are being exposed. We've got financial systems that were built to funnel money are being revealed and destroyed and crushed and crumbled. We've got economies that are being detangled from each other. We've got countries taking back their own power, taking back their own authority, taking back their own sovereignty, and backing out of these large global establishments that kind of encouraged everybody to push all their chips in the middle so that everybody can share. Basically giving up sovereignty and giving up uniqueness and giving up their own culture. And this has happened all over the world. And if you're watching what's happening since November, things have been falling apart rapidly. But you know what? They're not really falling apart. The old expired structures, frameworks, systems are being torn down because they were obsolete and they were no longer useful in the way, shape, or form that they were intended. so that something new can be reborn that will lead us into a more innovative future. Now, you could say right there, or maybe if you're listening to this, you say, well, I know his politics, but I'll tell you, you don't. You don't know my politics. But what you do know and what I'm sharing with you is my understanding of how planets and energy and the mystical and what you can't see, how it all works in unison, in unification with what we are as a society and the energy we bathe in on a daily basis and that we live and breathe in. Guys, the last time that Pluto entered Aquarius was 1778. And it was in Aquarius for just about a couple decades, just like it will be here. And guess what happened the last time Pluto entered Aquarius? The American Revolution and the French Revolution. In the French Revolution, the citizens took back their sovereignty at the expense of the monarchy. Remember, off with their head, off with their head. There was so much power sitting in the seat of monarchy that the French people rebelled and revolted and basically dethroned everyone in the French monarchy. And the French monarchy was basically put into prison, and the people, the citizenry, started to reform and started to unite and started to unify as sovereign people and as the power in the country. But they first had to recover the power from the monarchy. They took it back. And in the U.S. Revolution, you had a monarch that was across the water that was completely powerful and all-knowing and all-telling and all-powerful in these band of colonies. And the colonies had no say in what was going on in the British Parliament, no say in what was going on in the British royal courts. And the monarchy and the system of government in England and in the UK was exerting and demonstrating force on the American colonies with no say, giving no voice, giving no say, giving no vote to anybody in the citizenry that was under the control of this monarchy that was an ocean away. And the colonists said no more. And a revolt and a rebellion took place. And this is what we call the American Revolution. And eventually, the American spirit won out. The beginnings of the American spirit won out. And we took control over our own lives. We, the American citizens, took control and authority of our own lives. And then when the Declaration of Independence carried forth and the Constitution carried forth, the Constitution is the only document in the world where the people tell the government what they can and can't do. The government doesn't tell the people what we can and can't do. But over the course of a couple hundred years, the government's been taking back power little at a time. And our sovereignty as human beings and our personal power and our personal authority over our own lives has been relinquished little by little, bill by bill, law by law, vote by vote. And we've basically almost turned over all of our well-being to a government, because over time, when you give government power, the government will continue to take more power until the people stand up for themselves. Now, told you I didn't want to get really political, but I am trying to draw parallels between what happened back in the 1770s and 1780s and what's happening right here and right now. People are taking back power. The people that have been quieted, the people that have been shunned, people that have been squashed, people that have been disenfranchised at the expense of the power structure, whether it be the global elite, whether it be the politicians in Washington, whether it be the financial institutions that run the world and the world economy, the World Economic Forum, right? All of these big, powerful, worldwide, global establishments over decades and over time have taken autonomy and sovereignty and authority and personal accountability and personal ownership over people's own lives and put it in the hands of people in powerful positions. And this little planet called Pluto entered this sign called Aquarius so that the power can be restored to the people and power can be restored to individuals, empowered individuals. And so that in that case, the power structures had to start to be dismantled so that we could advance as in higher levels of sovereignty, in higher levels of personal power, in higher levels of freedom, in higher levels of just being inspired creators instead of fearful beings, reliant and dependent on a structure that takes our power away. Now, why am I, after all these episodes, 190 some episodes, why am I beginning to talk about revolution? Why am I beginning to talk about politics and economics and religion and the power play? Because there are people like me, and if you're listening to this, there are people like you that are on the cutting edge and the leading edge of this spiritual awakening and this spiritual movement that it's taking shape and taking form. And if you go back and listen to any of my episodes about personal power and personal authority and self-mastery, that was all in training for what's happening. Because you know what? It's going to continue to fall apart. Things are going to continue to be torn apart. Things are going to continue to be decimated. Religion and global politics and social contracts and being dependent on people for your benefit, for your well-being, and for your livelihood. More people are leaving the job market and entering entrepreneurship than ever before. There's very few people re-entering the job market that left, but there's more businesses being started than ever before. So the entrepreneurial bug is like catching because people want freedom and independence and to be authentic and to call the shots over their own lives. And entrepreneurism is a mechanism and a way to do that. And in order to also do that, and also to be a powerful entrepreneur and to continue to relinquish control and authority of our own state, we must master our internal state. We must create internal well-being and separate our internal emotional state from external circumstances that we can no longer trust, control, and hide behind. Because that's what all that stuff was built on. The education system, politics, geopolitics, the financial institutions, all of this stuff was so that we could feel safe and we could continue to live in a familiar certain set of circumstances that were predictable and that we could control. And in a lot of cases that other people controlled for us. And guys, listen, we can no longer trust those things because their useful life have eroded, has expired. And we're entering the age of individuation, personal power, personal sovereignty, and personal authority. And the only way to create these things is to break the dependence on what's happening all around you and learn to trust yourself and learn to trust your capabilities, learn to trust your power, and to learn to harness your power in this world and lead through energy and frequency instead of force and control. We are entering a completely different age. We are entering into a completely different construct in what this world looks like. And you might not see it for what it is yet, but you will. And when you do, go ahead and come back and listen to this episode, because I can see it clearly happening all around me. Because I tell you what, I've been preparing for this for a long time, because I felt a shift happening. I didn't quite know what was happening. But as I get clarity, and as we get clarity, and it's not just me, as the people that I learn from, and the people that I'm teaching, as we all get clarity together, you can see this thing. We're moving in a completely brand new direction, and we're moving there swiftly. It's time to either get on the cutting edge or to get lost. Now, somewhere at the beginning of this episode, I said there are people right now that are excited by the changes and excited by the opportunities, but there's people that are frightened by what's happening. And the people that are excited are riding the cutting edge and are on the tip of the spear for innovation and for personal power and for personal sovereignty. And we are clamoring for being able to own our own lives at a deeper level than ever before. But there are people who are frightened and who are scared, that have relinquished control and authority of their own being, of their own person, of their own lives. And in a lot of cases, they've relinquished so much control and authority, they don't know what to do, because they've given up their personal power. They've given up their personal sovereignty. They've given up their personal authority over themselves and their decisions and their lives. And that's okay. If you're frightened, I understand. But it's never too late to lean in, to start to take your power, take your sovereignty, take your authority, your autonomy back. But you've got to start. And it all starts with the path of personal mastery. But listen, in a world that's changing, in a world that's rapidly changing, the question is, are you keeping up with the pace of change? Because this is not the time that you want to fall behind. And if you ever feel like you're being swallowed up, you're being lost, you're being left behind, then you're succumbing to the fear, you're succumbing to the attachment that you have with the old circumstances, when the new circumstances are radically shifting and radically changing.